I wonder if that's the last thing the Pope does when he walks down the balcony. That's right, he guards a dress. He don't have to. Cheating. At some time in their life, many men believe they realize what's going on. But to be sure that they don't, they talk about it. One man said that he replaced the pursuit of formal education with the reading of books, and then replaced the reading of books with the reading of magazines, and then replaced the reading of magazines with the scanning of headlines, and then replaced the whole shebang with just thinking. He says he doesn't want to speculate on what further the future may hold. Life is not only alive, but life lives itself. You can see this by watching, in a certain way, how it actually takes no effort on your part to live an ordinary life. A boy asked his father, "Why is it that there are things that can be plainly seen that people don't normally see?" And his papa replied something having to do with, sound like, "Why don't you ask life?" or kind of mumbled. Body talk and the camouflaging of mental stolidity. The mind's normal sense of being forceful and sincere is to verbally kick ass and make lots of hand gestures. Engaged in a debate of reflection, a certain kid said, "Religion is so particularly hated by some because it is dumb." And the other side of his brain responded, "More likely because it tries to collectively civilize even those not individually ready." The extension of a certain myth. At the moment of creation, life briefly looks everyone dead in the eye. Most men blink and look away. A few do not. The former all forget the affair. The latter can't. Thus, any attempt to reestablish visual contact with life entails few participants. Mahler and Boswell out for a stroll. Only the stupid must speak. Only the simple need ask questions. If there was any true justice and reason in the great verbal wars, then the above would be the final shot fired and would mark the beginning of the great silent peace. Advanced Students Addendum. Do note that, since this is not the way things are, this is not how things are. And in conclusion, let us remember, only the stupid must speak, only the simple need ask questions. Did the added emphasis help? Things. An essay on paper. Since the mind's natural operations run directional, and since life itself is omnidirectional, man came up with the concept of reality to try and make some sense of things. What can we say? A locally directed essay. Being a mystic around these here parts is like trying to custom design yourself mentally, as far as is possible, under conditions that are all but impossible. Warrior's precept, any knowledge worth having is not readily, shall we say, available. And if it's really good, it's not available, period, shall we say. That's all we have to say on the matter. While him and his dog were having supper, one man noted between mouthfuls, "If you think it's ridiculous discussing human emotions, just consider the heightened folly of doing so regarding sad human emotions." And as he chewed his food, the dog pondered, sad, sad, and just could not get a handle on it. Titian and Constantine sit for a chat. The simple tend to fidget. The mathematics of mysticism. When the call goes out, for every 10,000 who respond, none save 12 are actually fit. While this may or may not be true, do note how readily the 10,000 plus others will accept it as gospel. Those of special sensitivity, should they find this a bit harsh, may consider the word mathematics, as used herein, as a synonym for joke of the day. Man's dual nature in the world of commercial jingles. To the body, the mind is like a mostly irrelevant voiceover. A lad asked his dad, how come the mind doesn't have anybody to kick around? The religion of man is the pursuit of a hope that if an earthquake don't kill you, a volcano will. And as long as we're already here in the cemetery, you might be interested in the tombstone on a certain mystic's grave. It says, I care not how I die, just as long as I am soon forgotten. Of course, this was said for his eyes only. In bed each night, just before he went to sleep, one man's mind would say to him, this concludes today's programming. Thank you for being with us, and be sure and join us again tomorrow. And now, good night. He admits that this doesn't actually happen, but says that it should. The simple tend to fidget. The simple tend to fidget. The simple tend to fidget, and the stupid to repeat themselves. Thanks for nothing. Ta-ta. Consciousness and the sport of surfing. Ordinary thinking can be aptly described as ride that wave. Anything else is like, dude, is like requiring attention. Like, man, like effort. Bummer. One early spring day, as they sat in the backyard by the septic tank, a lad graciously inquired of his paternal father, why do I get the impression that even though there may be real individual mystics yet alive on this planet at any given time, that there are no real groups of mystics so extant? And scratching his nose in that particular manner not peculiar to him, the elder replied, in spite of the fact that the question is stupid but sounds sort of insightful, I'll answer just the same by putting it to you, my laddie. Have you ever seen a wolf pack made up only of dominant males? And the young boy dutifully received this reply, pondered it, looked off above the trees, then looked down between his legs, chewed on his lip, and thought, without doubt, the remarkable talent of allegory is that it can rescue a man's thoughts, if he be so inclined, from the most uncertain of waters. And the old man playfully slapped him across the head, chuckling and saying, I heard that. The dead make the best heroes, at least for the simple. In its seduction of him, reality said to this one man, no need to think too much. By creating me, you've already done quite enough. Now you just relax. I'll take it from here. Historical correction. The Tower of Babel was not destroyed. You're standing in it. In fact, you are it. As the scope of his sight continued to soar, one man began wondering how much of the past he was actually a metaphor for. Definition: the mind. What mystics play with on the trip to Istanbul. For those of you from Ivy League and places east, it's the Tower, I know, of Babel. It's one of the primary theological distinctions between Episcopalians and Southern Baptists, whether you call it the Tower of Babel or the Tower of Babel. Or else you just wallow in your own religiously inspired palaver and screed. They represented me last time I was well. The expansion of consciousness as related to certain affairs of the bathroom. Collective thought is to individual thought as an outdoor manure pile is to something interesting to read while utilizing an indoor toilet. Public know-it-alls and the updating of a certain ancient adage and warning. Those who the gods would ingloriously destroy, they first give bullhorns. Again in the garden, Adam shouted to the heavens, "Now I'm back, can I shut up?" The more alert's instant updating of the instant allegory. Those who know there is no back to return to. And even if there was, they wouldn't go. So there. Now you can be quiet. The great secret work and its potential public attraction. If you demystify the mystical too much, the simple will take a hike. In Reed, the matter of man, the civilized. The question is, what constitutes being civilized? And how civilized is man? And the proper response is, just how far can man live from nature? And how did he ever get the idea that he could even do it? So, one reason mystics tend to become more famous after they die is that they can then be made into more sympathetic seeming figures. In that sense, you might be able to see how normally known religious saints are like dead freelance mystics with their irritating corners rounded off and laid over with a fuzzy, comforting verbal cover of some kind. Don't he look sweet now that he's dead? Yeah, and can't talk to us. I had lived that part, so. From the land of the fleshy and quiet to that of the gooey and noisy. Part of being simple is in believing life is more complicated than it is. Part of being sophisticated is in believing that it's much more complicated. Pertinent proverb update. If there was no evolution, man would have had to invent it. In fact, come to think about it, he did. Puzzling poetry conundrum updated. Which came first, the thought or the word spoken? A reputed mystic one day said to his followers, "Since cults and their leaders are back in the news, I want to proclaim to you people once again that I am not the Messiah. That is, I am not your Messiah, though I am mine." City smarts and urban recognition as per a definition. Popularity. Reality with even the reality removed. And that one seemed to give even life a chuckle, though I detected a hint of aggression therein, I think. But that can't be. Not with life itself, right? The routine's IQ test. Only the dense worry about their intelligence. The simple dream of mythical worlds, ones filled with darkness and danger. City sophisticates deny they dream of such realms, and in private are saddened by their claim. Looked at via local, linear perspective, at one point men were driven by myths, then myths driven by men. Those with that extraordinary sight eventually complete the cycle, only to begin a new one, and so on and on. Comparisons 501, graduate level. If the body is reality, then the mind metaphor. Comparisons 1003, super strata status. If the mind is reality, then the body is life. And if you get that hip, then you realize that everything is life, no matter what you label as component parts. Notes one chap, I originally had great faith in allegory and myth, but then came to have even greater hope in plain physical reality. But now see that all men have first a silent reliance on the unadorned life of the body long before any interest in things metaphorical is possible. Atomic axiom refresher. 'Tis not a question of whether or not you've got the cart before the horse. At the minimal level of extreme understanding, they're both the same. The demographics of the Transcendental's immediate general audience. The most commonly attracted group of those claiming interest in things mystical normally has as its leading edge the cynical, the sarcastic, and the argumentative. As the engine headed up steam, the conductor made note, "This is the mythical express, not the red ass." Definition correction. Mass hallucination. Man's collective intelligence believing itself correct. Cartography, travel, and higher explanations of the human state. To a mystic, all mappings of man are useless unless they actually lead one somewhere. Have you ever thought on the fact that man is the only being with fellow creatures standing around offering to, nay, even anxious to, help him? An ordinary man with an ordinary mind has no right at all to take life personally. Travel and the true warrior. A real mythical knight can discover sea monsters locally, in the depths of his carpet, at home. Interior design tip. Man's mind has a nap to it. The difference between being a magician and being a mystic. The rule for magicians is, tell the audience what trick it is you're going to do it, then tell them that you've done it. The rule for mystics is, don't tell them nothing, just do it. Life holds itself together in a closed system in such a way as to belie or to deny that an ordinary mind can never see anything, and the news item that appeared miraculously here tonight is in line with one with which some of you seemed of late to have found favor. We were taking note of how civilization continues to wrap around itself, how the mind of man continues to run in what seems to be actually going somewhere, yet with the singular talent, dazzling talent of not doing so. And you seem, some of you, to enjoy simply the notation of now at additional cost per month, plus first the technology breakthrough that allows phones to be able, that you can now apply for a service that when someone calls you, you look down the phone and it tells you the number of the party calling. It X amount per month. And it was shortly after that that they, what do they call it, caller ID mechanism, that you pay so much a month. Then shortly after that, it was announced that for an additional price, you can get caller ID blocker. That's the last I've heard. There's surely by now an override to the blocker. You understand? So you start out and you pay $10 and then you have to pay $20 for that, but then there'll be $30 to override the blocker. If you were ordinary people, that could sound to be some sort of cynical joke again, some sarcastic remark about how dumb people are. No, no, no. It is indeed based upon the kind of technology that was done analogically through communications, as a matter of fact. That's not the point, but on phone lines, those of you, if you're old enough and your knowledge, just your general knowledge of technology went back a decade or more, it would have been astounding. That was almost science fiction. If you went back 20 years or told your parents they weren't keeping up. Did you know that you can buy something now or rent something from your local phone company that when someone calls, you can look down and it will show where it is? I mean, that is really astounding as far as the general public knew. I don't know what the technology actually was. That's not the point. But all you got to do is refer back to movies and TV shows from more than a generation ago, and it was a constant theme they used as a hook for all kinds of murder mysteries and attempted rescues of kidnapped people. Is this mad dog killer or some bomber or kidnapper would call, and immediately, Kojak or some detective say, All right, quick, get on the other line, get the guy at the phone company and trace the call. And it always helped build up suspense, and because they'd always come back like, well, he hung up too fast because we got, and it shows them back there, split the screen. It's all these people back in the phone company checking wires, and it took like 30 minutes. Well, they could even narrow it down. Well, he's somewhere near Queens. We know that much. But, you got to keep on the line. Well, see, all you've heard that. And now, it was a big deal. And now, I assume you know, because it's 9 movies, that guys have to watch it. Because even kidnappers and people, I assume, watch movies and TV. Because now they know that all they got to do is have the phone company has already done whatever they do with the police department when they're expecting a call from a kidnapper. And as soon as you call, it just locks in, and they know where the number is, and so they know to drive somewhere over in Staten Island and call from a payphone, somewhere they're not going back, because even the crooks know that. It was a major breakthrough, technically, to be able to now rent a piece of equipment that shows who's calling you. You don't have to call the police. You don't have to do anything. You just pay X amount per month, and there it shows. Whew. Think how pleased many people were. If nothing else, a hobby. It don't have to be that you're plagued that much by ex-wives and attorneys or collection agencies. It could just, I guess, just an intriguing toy for a while. Be the first one in your group to have that kind of thing that shows who's calling. 2 or 3 months later, or whatever it was, you hear that, hey, you can get one to block it. And the same kind of people that bought that would surely buy it now, but you understand the reason you were laughing is there's the potential, it's right there, of a kind of cynical edge that's not kind of progress, or how stupid people are, or how dumb can you be. There was since you seem to have gotten something out of that, surely I've talked you out of or shamed you out of the cynical humor aspect. How about this one? This is older even than AT&T. This has been going on, well, the term I was about to pull out would really be attributed to I guess at least the late 19th century or 20th, but it's an old story. It was in here about mass hallucinations. I gave you an updated correction to the definition of what constitutes mass hallucination. It was called other things. Mass hallucination in English, my best guess is it came out of sociology, if not psychology, sometime in the last 80 or 90 years. But it's been used before. But let's just take sort of an up-to-date view that a psychiatrist, a psychologist would use, or a sociologist, to explain things. And they're still using the term. But now listen to this, because this is getting beyond the world of technology. This kind of observation, this kind of statement, this kind of judicial observation has been made by people out in the public realm. That is, life makes ordinary voices criticize, correct, find fault with the actions of other ordinary people. All the way from believing that some Egyptian king could do magic, to believing that some Jewish mystic could actually do real magic, turn water into wine, or that Buddha could sit out in the snow and in his jockey shorts when it was freezing and not even shiver. The whole idea of magic. That somebody comes back and they report a magic. Nowadays, some guy comes back to his local police station, or a friend of his works for a radio station. He says, last night, did you hear anything about strange lights in the sky? He goes, no. And he said, well, I stood in my backyard. You won't believe this, because I always laugh, and I saw a flying saucer. That son of a bitch couldn't have been a half a mile away from my backyard, and I watched it, and I moved and did all that. Somebody hears about it. Now take the full round, because I'm not laying on any importance on any of them, but it's all the way from feeding 10,000 people from outer space by only 10 orders of fish and chips from Long John Silver's, all the way to changing some kind of cheap Mad Dog wine into something that, a Nouveau Beaujolais or something of some intrinsic quality and taste. All the way from that to flying saucers or believing that you saw a mystic levitate after drinking the kind of strange tasting coffee that they offered you when you walked in, but that's another story. All the way from this whole area. Now listen, because this is not technology as per se that you can look out there and make some laugh about, well, it's only the telephone company, it's only these kind of commercial monopolies can make people act so stupidly with their finances as to buy something to identify callers and then wait 6 months when they already got developed and then sell you another one or rent you another one to stop it. You can't look out there. We're now here, but it seems to be now the dance intellectually between people rather than between men and science, or between an individual and commercial enterprises that might overwhelm you with their superior cunning, which makes you want to go off on a sidetrack if you're my kind of people and think, that is strange, because you'll accept the fact that General Motors is smarter than I am, or that you are. That you ask a salesman, well, doesn't General Motors now, I might buy this new Buick, but you mean you don't have airbags as standard on the driver's side? I mean, the passenger side also? No, oh no, General Motors has discovered that airbags are not going to save any life. They have been studying this now for well over 20 years, that the passenger side is absolutely irrelevant. It's a waste of having to add the expense to you. And you go, oh, and you take it. Not only General Motors, that's a salesman. A guy with a 5th grade education. It may or may not be true, but you just hear that General Motors decided that you don't need one. You go, all right. Which again, if you're really simple, which we'll pretend you're not, you shouldn't be laughing at that any more than you would laugh at the church knows what's right. Of course, the church says that they're only speaking for God, that He knows what's right, and they're just passing it along. And if you're ordinary, especially religious ordinary, you go, yeah, but there's a great deal of difference between a salesman there at your local Buick dealer telling you what General Motors thinks is best for you, and a priest telling you what God thinks is best for you. Right. Glad you cleared that up for us. Where were we? They take a report of something extraordinary, something out of the realm of linear, sequential, city-accepted logic. Someone says, I saw a guy do so-and-so. I saw a flying saucer. Take your choice. I saw a mystic levitate. I saw a flying saucer in my backyard. Anything, and we're not taking up for any of those, but this continually goes on in life. It is this small battle of a few people. And I don't mean that they're all mystics who understand anything, but there's always somebody running around the edge of the parade, the general parade, always saying, well, let's take a left up here. I took a left up here. I think I took a left up here. I got out of the parade and I wandered off when you guys were still marching, and I believe I saw some kind of strange apparition. I saw another parade. I saw some people marching in another direction. I saw people floating. In the whole parade, they've been going the same way. They're all together. All the sheep, all the cows. They think, well, have we ever seen reality that is un-Bovinian? And they go, no, because by its very definition, un-Bovinian reality is non-reality. It's insanity. Because if us cows, and there it is, 6 billion cows, more or less, they all go, have you ever heard of another parade down here? A parade of creatures, he says, that didn't even have udders? But don't make me say that, well, that's utterly ridiculous. No, ridiculous. The humanity, the collective humanity, what you understand is from their view, they're correct. At first, and this is not just a temporal matter when I say at first, because they have done it 5,000 years ago and they do it today. But now watch how it goes. It's the same basis of caller ID and then caller ID blocker. The first statement, the first observation, the first response given to someone who sees something extraordinary, reports something extraordinary, is they go, well, you know it's hard to believe. And go, yeah, I knew that. And they go, well, do you have any collaboration? Were there any other witnesses to it? Or is it just your word? Well, it's just mine. And even if to be as charitable about this scenario, if their response is as soft and as lenient as possible, the local reality, the spokesman for their local reality, local scientists, Reese, whoever, that part of their parade, if they say, well, you have no collaboration, there were no fellow witnesses. No, I was just out there alone, I just saw it. If he still wanted to speak of it, or if they have to turn to others, if others hear about it, the first dismissal, this is caller ID, the first dismissal is, even if they say, we're trying to withhold judgment. We do not know if the man is genetically flawed in his neural system. We don't know whether he's got brain damage. We don't know anything. We don't know whether he's suffering from alcoholism. By all appearances, he seems to be an ordinary, sane person. But this extraordinary report we have from this apparently ordinary person is unsupported. It's one man, all of us, just in general, don't believe that anyone can levitate. All of us in general do not believe in flying saucers. All of us do not believe there's some other reality. No, go, well, no. And they go, even though he's one of us, he's one of our relatives, one of our friends, still, it's one man. I mean, sir, if you just had some corroborating witnesses, if somebody else had been there, why is it always one guy? You understand? That is, without any particular derogatory insult, without any real pejorative dismissal of the man, in that sense of like, well, you're crazy, it's still no basis that they have this logical argument that other logical, that is, other ordinary people cannot deny. And that is, we've heard these kind of stories, but they're always from one eyewitness. Case, it's one person who says it's true. And even if we're not going to call him a liar, but there is no corroboration to it. I mean, it's one person. If there'd only been a group of people. No. And that's always been it, up to a certain point. But then it appeared to be progress, like blocker of caller ID. Then you have 7 people, 10 people. They go off on a hiking trip, and they say that they suddenly came up a clearing, and there was a guy dressed up like a mystic, and he was floating off the ground. Or they were out there in the woods, and they'd walked all day. They're all in good shape. They had no alcohol with them. And suddenly, just before they were going to turn in, they look up, and it's a flying saucer. 10 people. They come back and report it. All 10 agree. There's an answer. It's mass hallucination. You're not going to think about it right. I'm going to make you. It's not irony. It's not sarcasm. It's the living proof. It's not just me trying to make a point now, as you know by now. It is a living, point blank, in your face. I mean, you can't get away from it once you see it, of how the human mind works within certain confines, and the confines are such that there you are. Back to this one, you're at home living in an apartment the size of a phone booth. And in that phone booth is a dragon, green. And somebody finally points it out to you, and it's like you lived inside the dragon. You go, well, that's not a dragon. When I moved in, the place was painted green. No, it's not. Your walls are not green. That's a dragon in there. And you're like out here to it, and people do not see it. Listen again. Remember, this is not an attack on humanity. This is taken as serious business. I assume you all know, you can look up in a book on psychology, sociology, and mass hallucination is still taken. They can't explain it much, but hell, they can't explain anything much. But it's taken as a serious psychological term, a serious theory, a serious dynamic, even though whoever, I can put some words in their mouth, whoever would be the word nowadays in I think they used to call it if they specialize in the area of the psychology of crowds. I'm sure there's still an area, the psychology of mass movement, great political upheavals and this and that, the psychology of crowds, mass movements. The term is still valid. People still look right in the camera, a psychologist, a reporter, well, a reporter report what they checked with somebody when these 10 people said they just saw something absolutely unbelievable just right outside of Ontario, just right outside of Chekin. And some, they consult with a leading psychologist, whoever, and they say, you know, this is not the kind of things, we've heard other reports in that same general area over the last few months, the reporter says, of an individual here and there. There's been, if I recall, about 3 farmers in that same general mountainous region over the last 6 or 8 months that have reported seeing similar sights. And this guy, they're sitting there in the suit, and the doctor so-and-so, he says, yes, yeah, I've heard that. He says, well, you know, we keep dismissing it like it's one person. He's standing there and the sun gets in his eyes, or you know, he worked too hard. It's an optical illusion. Yes, yes, yes. But now we have 12 people. They're not related. They were just in that same area, and they just happened to come down to the village. They were all so excited that night. 12 people. They're not related. They don't own any commercial enterprise together. They're not trying to write a book. 12 people came down that night to the village and reported. They described the same sight. 12 people, not one. How do you explain that? You know, the first time it was like, well, that's one person, and you know how easy it is for one person to get misled. Even if the farmers, the individual ones that sober, they meant well, whatever that means, I'm going to get into that some night about meaning well. That has excused more people than a drunken governor selling pardons when he's been, he's going out of office, a lame duck governor in Texas or Mississippi. At any rate. You understand, the first group, these individuals, even if they do not specifically single out in the individuals and try to say, well, he's known to be an alcoholic or he's known to tell lies, they just seem to be reasonable people. They are still, in a sense, if not dismissed, they are held in abeyance. There is a kind of pseudo-stymieing of people's inquiry by almost explaining like, well, it's one person. And you know how it is. If there'd been more people there, if he just had his brother, if somebody else had been there, they could have said, well, turn your head, the sun's hitting your eye off the plow or something. It made you, and he'd go, oh, but he was there alone, and you know how easy it is when you're alone to imagine things. And everybody goes, yeah. So there it is. One person, and it's so easy for one person to be misled about something extraordinary because you can just imagine it. Okay. Next scene, 12 people describe it. When they were saying it would be a different story if you had more people. And if it had been somebody besides you. Move over 2 weeks later, there's more people. It's 12 people. Is that going to have any effect? I got caller ID. Aha, but I can get a blocker. There are 12 people now, not one. Aha. And at first you'd think, well, they got them. You can't got them. The mind is not victim to got them. Well, ordinary people believe otherwise, but of course then that shows the mind got them. They think they're hunting the mind, and every now and then they go, I got him. It gets real tricky. Well, it's like dancing with a glue baby. You keep thinking, well, she can't get away from me. It doesn't pay to think about it a whole lot further. See? Or it doesn't pay around to go, who asked who to dance first? I don't want to think about that. It's a story, sir, if somebody else had seen it. 2 weeks later, people here that saw it. Now what do you say? You ever heard of mass hallucination? The term is taken very seriously. And I don't mean it shouldn't be taken seriously. It should be taken just as seriously as be patriotic, pay your taxes, be religious, be kind to your in-laws, take a bath. If the bank loses it, take your choice. All the relevant life that should one be able to escape from, but this is not one of them. There is no escape. They dismissed you last week, using you generically, for seeing this extraordinary thing, having this extraordinary experience. And they say, if they cannot explain it any other way, and if there's still some decent, civilized intercourse going on between you to report this to, they will say, if nothing else, they'll say, well, we don't doubt that you believe you saw it. We're not saying that. But what can we do with it? What can we make of one man making such an extraordinary statement of you saying that you saw, that you had that kind of extraordinary experience? You do understand our position. It's just you, and that's all of us. You go, yeah. And it's almost a friendly pat on the back. But it verges on being accepted as scientific. As you leave, they go, you know, it would have been a different thing. You know, not the scientific method. If there'd been some other observer of the phenomenon. If there'd just been somebody else there, so there was that kind of similar report. And they kind of pat you on the back and you leave. Tell people. You go, now what? They go, uh-huh. And they hear it, all 12. Have you ever heard of mass hallucination? And the term, like every other term, you cannot inquire into what is the basis of this being taken seriously. Exactly what does this mean? Would you just explain to me what does this mean? They're going to treat you like they got caller blocker in your case, even though you're there personally. It simply cannot be explained. It is of no more singular out. But you understand they have got you of Vienna and earlier and go directly to the University of Mississippi, where psychology reached its zenith in the 30s. As they put it down there, as they used to present it, they would say, hey, they got you coming and they got you going. I saw something phenomenal, extraordinary. Well, it's just your word. I mean, if there had been other witnesses, dun, 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 dun. Scene 2. I got 12, I got 24 other people saw it. Mass hallucination. Next. For anyone who may have just walked in off the street, I'll repeat again, this has nothing to do with an attack on psychology or anything, and it's not really of any particular use other than passing entertainment just immediately. It's not really of pertinence between you and out there, even though it seems to happen. It is what goes on in your own intelligence. It is your own consciousness, and you say, well, sometimes I think so-and-so, or I had this fleeting thought, I believed one time I saw such and such. And back to the guy that, you remember those of you that like consciousness and children's television? Is peering into his open skull. One guy looked down at the two sides of his brain and went, oh, the Bert and Ernie show. You think, I almost sometimes have extraordinary, personal, some kind of original insight into things that just is almost unbelievable. But thank God, suddenly, the other side of my head goes, hey, were there any other witnesses?
Yeah.
And there's only in your head, there's only 2 possible witnesses. You and your partner, or to use that kind of physical allegory, your right brain and your left brain. Your right brain says, I saw something extraordinary. And the other brain says, you got any backup? Anybody else see it? And of course, no. You think, well, you know, it's just me. But even if you came up, rather than having other people now, rather than speaking physically, numerically, it is then, we'll have to turn it into a number of your own observations, your own sightings. Since your left brain comes back and it still didn't have 12 people to support it, but you come back now and you go, wait a minute, what you just missed, I told you that I thought so-and-so, or I looked around the other night at life and I went, wait a minute, such and such is going on. Do you remember that? And they go, oh yeah. And you heard me and I told you that and you went, do you realize that's one man's observation, that's one man's sighting. The rest of everything you know in life, everything that I know. I've sat through college. I've been as old as you are. You go, yeah? And it goes, no, I never said that. You never heard that. That's not an accepted belief. You go, I know that, but, you know, Jesus, I'm being sincere. I'm telling you. And it goes, well, yeah, I know you personally, but, you know, that's just, how can you say that, how can you put any value to that when it's just your observation? I mean, is there anybody else? Do you have some other group of people that agree with that? They go, no, I never even heard of it. I never thought about it. Yeah. Sometime later, you present to it again. You're still the same sane left brain that you were. No new damage done. You come back and you say, you made that observation? No. You go, I have had that same, not just exact thought, but almost from different views of it. It's happened to me now. I've made that kind of personal observation. We're talking about scores of times now. It's not a one-shot deal. You're back to almost now pushing that something is going on out here that you and I have never realized. And this other side still resists. And it now treats your numerous observations in the same way that this one farmer comes back now with numerous corroborating witnesses. You say, I have seen this more than once. I have now seen it scores of times. In the right brain, Bert says to Ernie, mass hallucination. You're going crazy. I mean, I let it go when you came up one time and told me you saw that. I didn't say anything. I tried to discourage you, you know, subtly. I didn't want to frighten you. I didn't want to be insulting, but I just said, hey, Ernie, nobody looks at life like that. You know that. And Ernie goes, oh. And he goes off and still, not just the same one over and over, because that kind of repetition is a form of stupidity. It is a form of recurring hypnosis, but you begin to see it just from slightly different views, over and over. And you come back to, Ernie comes back to Bert, the left brain comes back to the right brain, allegorically speaking. Is that kind of crap still popular with New Agers? I shouldn't do things like that because I can just see people going, now we're getting somewhere. No, we're not. I just use it because your brain happens to be divided into two. If it weren't, by now I would have made up a story that it actually is two kingdoms in there and they just hadn't found the dividing line. It just happens to work fortuitously that your brain does have an apparent division. Bert comes back to Ernie. Ernie comes back to Bert enough times and says, something is going on here. It is not just one observation. That was not a one-shot delusion of some kind. Because it's not even the same view. It's not as though I'm hypnotized to some idée fixe somewhere that I'm just staring. It's just now from all kinds of unexpected. I'm not at the same place on the mountain where I saw the flying saucer the first time, to change allegories in mid-mountain. Then I was down the valley, and I was up on this other ridge, and I was in this other place I wasn't even thinking about. And I keep seeing there is some serious validity to this other sense of reality, this other observation I'm making. And you just missed it before. And now I let it go. I thought, well, maybe it is a one-shot deal. It is more than a one-shot deal. It is now scores of times I've observed it. And Bert said, well, I didn't want to say this, but you're going crazy. Being crazy one time, it doesn't really count. You understand? I let it go. I didn't say anything when you said that first time. I just tried to dismiss you by saying, well, come on, Ernie, nobody else has seen that. You cannot take that seriously. Just think about it. If there was any validity to that, would not the world have seen it? Would not our leading scientists? At least Mr. Henson himself would have seen it. At least PBS, the directors of PBS, the Dodge Foundation, somebody, the underwriters, somebody would have seen this by now. And the first time, left brain, Ernie goes, well, all right. But you come back, and they've got an answer for you. I've seen it scores of times, hundreds of times now. All right, I didn't want to say this to you. I was hoping you'd get over it. We're talking mass hallucination now. Being crazy once is tolerable. You can be crazy once in some specific area and still slide by. We all do it. But if you're going to keep pressing this, I'm going to have to take it point blank. You're beginning to now live in a delusion. As they say, psychology department at the University of Mississippi. Then they got you coming and they got you going, which is nothing new, but that's just the way that they wanted to describe it down there. It's like a combination between, should I do this one? I was going to even check. Between Samson and guys wrestling nude outside a bar in Jackson, Mississippi. It's a variation. That is, they got you by the long hairs and they got you by the short hairs. No matter where you grab a man, if you know how to do it, they got you. No matter which end you show to life, it's got you. I'm sorry, sir, but you could be mistaken because that's just one man's observation. I mean, it'd be a different story if we had corroborating witnesses. 115 other people saw it with me this time. Aha. Mass hallucination. How can the mind expect to get out of that? Of course, if you know anything by now, you don't. But part of the, shall we say, problem, if you want to, is ever finding how to step out of that. Now, what will keep a man from even moving? What will keep you from considering anything of value? Because everybody can think of something crazy in a useless sense. That you certainly don't need to fool around with the likes of this to watch or read a book on flying saucers and people being abducted and taken to caves below the stadium at the University of Mississippi, which I don't want to think about. You can read about that, and you can have just absolutely insane thoughts. I mean, you can just, the earth is hollow, or at least it's hollow under Mississippi, which, again, I don't... I should give them their due. If it's hollow, if the earth is hollow in the University of Mississippi, it's also hollow in Lithuania. I don't want to explain anymore. It's just a word to the wise. And parts of Lapland. It's according to what herding type business you're in, or what aspect of the herding. As long as you believe that it's either here or there, as long as you believe that the mind can make some sort of extraordinary progress, that the mind itself can learn something of a breakthrough nature. It is not the fact that you can sit around and agree with something you already heard or have some absolutely insane, irrational imagination. I mean, you can do it by watching science fiction movies. You can do it by doing all kinds of things. You can do it by reading books, apparently, having to do a mystical effort and hear about reports of great mystical masters floating through the air, being in 20 places at once, owning flying machines 4,000 years, whatever the hell it is. And you can go, yeah, and you can begin to imagine that. But the question is, and you can be well-meaning, the question is, of what value is it? And I'll save you some time, as I'm glad to do, and answer, as you probably suspect, N-O. You got two O's? N-O-O-N-E. Noon. I believe that was supposed to have been none, wasn't it? No matter what it is, if it's not a value, of what value is it to a mystic? And that was one after the several there toward the end of a spasmodic series of tonight's having to do with the attempt to travel in the mystical sense and certain aspects of it. And I point out that to a mystic, all mappings of man, which is what, in a sense, I'm staying here doing, it's what all religions do, it's what psychology does, it's what all social reporting does, it's what the ordinary conversation between humans, the kind of reality that is supported by silent and overt conversation and behavior between ordinary people, that supports what seems to be a reality holding everything together with one particular culture, one herd. That is a mapping of their reality, is a mapping of man. And the item tonight was, the one I'm referring to now was, it said, to a mystic, no mapping of man is of value unless it leads him somewhere. That is, past the point of any entertainment. If you considered some of the things I say, if you were speaking of you generically, if somebody heard this, no, that's kind of interesting. Sometimes it makes me chuckle or I think a little bit. So what? I mean, Jesus, a comedian, can do that. You can do it. No, you can't do it. A comedian can do that. You can find some, I'm sure, conversations, some sermons, observations by priests, rabbis, street corner mystics of all kinds. You can, in passing, find them of some interest or think, boy, that's so weird, I never thought of that. There's somebody that says, Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and all their ilk, the reason they were so extraordinary and why you can't be one is they weren't from this planet. And I know which planet they were from, and they still send messages. And I get them. And you can think, boy, how weird. And you can just be the type that, and there are plenty of people like this, that just can almost have a low-level mystical experience from reading Mad Magazine or some kind of looking at psychedelic posters. That is, you can go, wow! You might absolutely deny in private that you take it all that seriously, but it's kind of like fun. Like, wow! You know, if that's true. Think about it. All these great people from another planet. Wow! And here's a guy standing there, looks kind of sane, and he says that he's actually in touch with them. You go, are you really, man? He goes, yes. And he even looks like he might, meet you later. It's like he'd say, would you like me for coffee later? I'll tell you about it. And just on the surface, the man seems sane. He go, yeah. You go, no, you're putting me on. You're just saying this for the crowd. No, they speak to me. I got this machine that they left, and they send me messages. Buddha and Jesus and all those people, the whole idea of life after death, it is true in a sense, but they didn't die. They just went back home to the other planet. We just can't see it, but I know where it is. You want me to tell you about it? You go, wow. In other words, it's interesting. It is so ridiculous. You can say it's interesting. You can say it's intriguing. You can say it's fascinating. To a mystic, to someone actually born to this, someone who is actually going to benefit from it, no mapping is of value unless it takes you somewhere. If it is simply imaginary pictures, even if it's pictures, and you don't know whether they're imaginary or not, and they begin to paint pictures of Istanbul, of other planets, or what it would be to be more conscious. And it's intriguing. And the mapping tells you why you're not there, tells you why you probably can't get there, and why only the mapper ever got there, him and his friends, or whatever it is. No matter how interesting it may be, no matter how discouraging it may be, which is interesting to most people, if you have any ability to ever move, to actually do this thing, what the hell values of any map other than passing entertainment if it doesn't lead somewhere? Nobody wants to think about that. Well, sure they do. They can think about it because that doesn't count. They can think about it and go, well, that could be true or not. Then all you can do is kind of pick up your ticket and your battered old cardboard suitcase and walk over to another platform. Or else privately threaten to throw yourself under a train if you ever speak to another civilian again. Or at least stick your tongue into the Red Ball Express. What was the point tonight? Wait a minute. Give me a hint. Very few people know that there's no way out. But knowing that there's no way out is just another way of saying that you now recognize that the ordinary traffic passing by that is life and that is your mind's conception of traffic. It is seen from a position on the porch. And as long as you think you can escape from the porch, as long as you think you're supposed to escape from the porch, as long as you look at the porch as being some kind of confining prison, it is. A mystic has nothing to say about traffic after he looks around and goes, well, I'll be goddamned. Yeah. He has nothing else to say about the porch until he looks down and thinks, what a mystical breakthrough. What an intellectual giant leap forward on my part. I suddenly realized where the hell I am. And having to do with the transcendental's attraction to a general audience, I'll close tonight with the one that says, if you demystify mysticism too much, the simple will take a walk. Yeah. Is anybody still here? Oh. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether anybody's still out here. See, that was a humorous, that's one man's opinion, theatrical ending. Thank you. Is anybody out there? Is the tape over? I really think now's it. Are you sure the tape's over? Don't try and pull that shit. I saw it happen in a movie one time. This guy was a real nice guy. He was like a preacher or some kind of something. Everybody loved him. And one day they left the cameras on. I'm not stupid enough to fall for that, am I?